Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and strategies behind living a longer, healthier, and more purposeful life. In this episode, we're joined by science writer and provocateur Amy Alkon, author of the groundbreaking new book, Going Menopostal: What You and Your Doctor Should Know About the Real Science of Menopause and Perimenopause. Amy's work pulls no punches. She exposes the unsettling truth about how much of modern medicine, especially around women's health, isn't grounded in solid evidence. And it's not just about menopause. From the broken medical systems to the myths around diet, exercise, and aging itself, Amy shows us how we can reclaim our health, our vitality, and even our identity as we age. We talk about how to outsmart our biology and behavioral patterns to build sustainable habits without needing to be saints of discipline. Amy shares the most powerful and efficient ways to eat and exercise for cellular health and longevity, why inflammation and insulin resistance are at the root of much suffering, and how we can get the benefits of metabolic health without eating food that tastes like particle board. We also get into her unapologetic take on aging, why old is the new black, how aging can be your superpower, and how to rewrite the narrative on what it means to live a vibrant life in your 60s, 70s, and beyond. Whether you're a male or female, 35 or 75, you're going to walk away with insight, inspiration, and Amy's refreshingly candid take on how we can all age well, armed with real science. Well, Amy, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I really love your work and your unapologetic take on the science community. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to write about science and to be known as the advice goddess?
I actually am no longer known that way. And it's actually a name I hated. I picked it on a moment's notice, and I was really sorry. And then I changed it to the science advice goddess, which didn't help. But this all started this is my accidental career. I thought I would write probably TV or movies. And I was living in New York, and I'm from the Midwest. You know, your parents don't send you to grad school for film. We're going to pay for you to watch movies, like a lot of money. I thought that was hilarious. And I got a job in advertising for commercials. And this was Ogilvy and Mather, and it was in the 80s. Really fun. It was the heyday of advertising. And I had two friends, and we would do these madcap things. And one of the things we decided to do was, like Lucy from Peanuts, have the advice 5-cent stand on a Soho street corner. Only we thought, nobody's going to give us a nickel, so we'll just make it free. So we have this sign, free advice from a panel of experts presented by the advice ladies, and all these topics listed, like wigs and beards, proper spelling. I mean, I didn't even take psychology in grad school in college. So it wasn't like we had special knowledge. And we thought people would walk past us. We'd be a visual joke, and they just walk past and laugh. We'd laugh. All's good. You know, New York, the sign said free. They lined up around the block. And people would ask us the silly questions on our sign, but they also would ask us serious questions. And I felt really irresponsible because what did I know? But I've always been this crazy reader, and I just voracious. And so I read through all of psychology, and I was shocked that Freud was just this huge charlatan. He just made all this stuff up. It's ridiculous. And I discovered the work of Albert Ellis, which really dovetailed with my the foundation of me, which is being rational and thinking critically and being a skeptic. And Albert Ellis founded one arm of cognitive behavioral therapy, but his is called rational. And he was very influenced by Epictetus, who was one of the Stoics, who said, basically paraphrasing, it is not events that disturb us, we take of them. And Ellis would say, you're disturbing rationally. And so this was where I started getting into science. First, I had reasoning in my column. Sorry, I skipped ahead a little bit. So the advice ladies, we're just doing this on Saturdays. We do it, and it's really fun, and it's rewarding. People are really helped by us somehow. And so when we become a thing, this guy Eric Messenger writes a story about us for the New York Times for the style section. Now there's photos and stuff. Everything gets cut. It's like a 2-paragraph article. But being this enterprising person from Michigan and wanting to get ahead, I run with this, and I get us a deal with De Niro, a book deal, a column in the New York Daily News. And we were doing all this stuff. And then one of my partners, she had a drug problem, and we split up, and I took over the column. And what I didn't know was that Albert Ellis, who I was a fan of his work, I'd read all his books, I have one right here somewhere because they're just endlessly useful. He was a fan of my column because it was so reason-based. And so he became something of a mentor. And I was all worried about credentials, thought I'd go to college, for grad school and get some kind of degree. And he said, don't do that. It'd be a waste of time. You know what you need to know. And the truth was, I'm more science-based than Ellis ever was. And so I didn't know what I needed to know. And I felt an increasing responsibility. Actually, I felt like there was a huge hole. I thought, I need to have a column where I give advice. It needs to not just be rational, but evidence-based. And so that's when I began learning behavioral science, going to these conferences, showing up. People were very nice to me, especially in the evolutionary psychology world, where I'm, even though I'm not an academic, that's my area of expertise. And so I'm doing this. And then what happens is, around 2007, a science writer friend invites me to dinner with this guy, Sander Greenland, who is one of the top biostatisticians and methodological reformers in the world. He's the co-author of the seminal textbook in epidemiology, modern epidemiology, and he's also really generous. And so I was very worried about, how would I evaluate the science properly? Behavioral science, it's not complicated. It's not as weighty as medical science, because if I interpret that wrong, you could die. And if I interpret the psychology studies wrong, or don't notice, there's something missing, or whatever the problem is, okay, maybe you go on a bad date. And so Sander started to coach me over the years on how to vet. This is really important. And then he also started sending me articles and papers about medical fraud and error and abuse. And so I became better and better through scoldings, beatings. Those are metaphorical, actually, with his looking at my column, and we'd talk and everything. And so what happened was, this was like 2016, 2017. I forgot to say, I syndicated, I'm like going backwards. I syndicated my column that was in the Daily News. Sorry, I think I'm out of focus again. Sorry. And then to a whole bunch of papers, and I was doing very well. And then I get this hot flash, and what you want to do is to say, oh my God, I'm so uncomfortable. I'm going to go to the doctor and say, what should I do? But I knew better from Sander. So what I do is I dive into the research, and I look at the research as compared with the practice standards. And there is this vast, I'm deeply upset. And so I understand what I need. This was perimenopause that I was in. This hot flash it came during the transition years to menopause. 3 to 10 years when you're quite uncomfortable, if you're a lot of women. And then and people don't know as much about it. There's more knowledge about it now, but I figured out that what I needed was oral micronized progesterone, and not estrogen. This is to make up for what's missing, basically what goes missing in perimenopause, which is the progesterone that's made when you ovulate. It's made from the egg, the sac that ruptures with the egg in it. That litter from the ruptured sac, it's yellow and waxy. It's called the corpus luteum, and that's progesterone for the second half of your cycle. But if you don't ovulate, which happens in perimenopause, and women have these periods that seem normal and as disturbing and yucky as the rest of them, you don't make progesterone, and this can cause you all sorts of problems. For example, if you have a really bad perimenopause, as I did, I really like nice. I'm kind if you're not making noise in front of my house at 3 a.m. And I became this just rage-filled bitch. And I didn't act it out, but I wanted to. Someone's in the hardware store line, some nice man. You can see he's nice, probably got grandkids. He's humming. I want to smother him with it. I want to murder this man because everything bothers you. And then you have the hot flashes, and there are other symptoms like nausea, sleeplessness, and then you have brain fog because of that. So I see that oral micronized progesterone is the thing that will help me. And I go to my medical provider, Kaiser Permanente, big HMO, And I asked my gynecologist, who's really a terrific guy, can you please prescribe me Prometrium? That's the brand drug for the oral micronized progesterone, but in generic form. And that's what Kaiser does. And I support that so more people can afford medical care. And I'm very explicit about which drug I want and everything. And he puts the prescription through. He's sure, yes. And I justified why I wanted it. I explained it to him. And then I check my prescription just to be careful. And I see that actually, I got there. And it was medroxyprogesterone acetate, which is the synthetic knockoff of progesterone, which has very negative effects on your cardiovascular system, your brain, your breasts. It can increase your breast cancer risk, binds with the wrong receptor in the breast, the glucocorticoid stress receptor in the breast. And so you don't want to take this if there's this slightly more expensive drug that is same as progesterone in your body, but FDA approved. That's very important. And so I end up fighting 3 battles with Kaiser to get the drug, to get it covered, and to get the amount they take in France, which is 300 milligrams. Now, in America, they give people 100 and 200. Why? Particular reason. They haven't compared the effectiveness of these different doses here. Now, there's starting to be more research on this, but there wasn't then. And the dose in France is important because we don't know how we metabolize steroids. Are we rapid metabolizers, or do we which means you clear them quickly, or do they stick around in large quantities? And so that's why 300 milligrams is important, because it protects your endometrium, your uterine lining, from becoming, it's called hyperplasia, from estrogen driven overgrowth, which can become cancerous. And progesterone is also very important because what it does in breasts is it takes these delinquent cells, these cells that are just generic cells, and it differentiates them. It causes them to mature into breast cells. So basically, you've given them a job, so they can't be delinquents and then just double into cancer. So progesterone is really and important to take. And medroxyprogesterone acetate, the drug on Kaiser's formulary, you don't want. So I was quite lucky because my doctor he's such a good guy, my gynecologist. And then I basically snowstormed with all these papers on progesterone and, from France, it dose everything. And so he brings in his boss, and I forgot, I had to pitch to a panel to tell them why I needed this drug that wasn't on their formulary. I needed it covered because, it was quite expensive and things were getting hard for those of us who write for newspapers. And so I had this medical plan. It's supposed to cover drugs. And when you only get the drug that can increase your cancer risk and cause all these problems, that's not okay. So the panel, I do this whole thing, with all the details and the studies and citations and this packet. And I finished the meeting, and then what's the answer? No, declined. And so what I learned was there was not even a gynecologist or an endocrinologist on the panel. They knew nothing about what I was talking about, no background. And all they did was call some gynecologist and say, what's Kaiser's standard of care? Well, fantastic. That's really terrible. So these panels are basically for people to go cry and feel heard and then be denied by people who are uninformed, ignorant in the area you're talking about, and don't listen to the science. They assume you're some dummy who Googled or something, and not somebody who brings like the armloads of science. And so what happened was I do mediation, and I use that to help my homeless clients to get bureaucrats to behave themselves and waive DMV paperwork and give them, fix the toll fees and everything. And so I used that on my poor doctor and his boss. And so they kept saying no. But then she had agreed, his boss, very fair. She's the head of gynecology then, not anymore. She's big way in the hospital now. She agreed to meet. And so I, again, snowstormed them with all this research. And I said, wait, you're not, because I was sleeping. I hadn't been sleeping. One of the horrible symptoms for some of us is not sleeping, really having terrible insomnia. And I had all my life. It was like someone clocked me at a large frying pan. Nighttime, put my head on the pillow, 6 a.m, I wake up, beautiful sleep. And instead, I was having like a toast in a psychotic toaster, up, down, like 5 or 6 times a night. And it's really terrible because what happens is you don't get the clearance. There's a system called the glymphatic system in the brain. This is researched by Megan Neragard, this cool neuroscientist, where she and her colleagues found that your brain is too big in your skull to get cleaned out during the day. And only at night when your brain shrinks through decent sleep is it small enough that the cerebrospinal fluid can wash through and get rid of the Taco Bell cups and whatever else you've got in there, like the backseat of a teenager's car. So anyway, where was I in all of this? I got the progesterone by them, which was really wonderful. And I said, look, I assume any risk, knowing that I didn't have risk, that I was doing the smartest thing, the most protective things for my bones, for my heart, for my cardiovascular system. And then I asked this question. So you'll give this progesterone, this will be on your formulary. You'll give it to other patients, right? Naive. Were you born yesterday, Amy? Apparently so. And so I was so angry at this. All these women being put at risk, they could have a panel read the science, an actually expert panel read the science that I presented and to verify it. But no, they denied it to women. And I was so angry that I wrote this book. Here's my book. And it is a book born of outrage and a lot of really black coffee, Going Menopostal, which describes both the anger that I had and that women should have at the betrayal of all women who are seeking care in this area, and actually in other areas of medicine, all of us, where we're not given evidence-based, and we deserve that. And we're also not given care from people with any expertise in menopause and perimenopause. This is the untold scandal, the secret of gynecology departments that I bring out in the book, that most of the doctors are what I call baby doctors. They're maternity specialists and reproductive specialists, no training, no expertise in treating menopausal women, but they're made to do it anyway. Business as usual. Here, see her. And then there are practice standards they can go by, lists of here's what you do in this case. But that's not the same as knowing the science, and they're often evidence-based. So this is really, really terrible, and it's actually a violation of medical ethics. This is malpractice as usual, where they expect gynecologists to treat women when they have no expertise in the problems that women are bringing in, and it's just what goes on, and it's not disclosed to the women. No, that's not ethical. I quote this woman, I think her name is Sarah Hull, who's a cardiologist, who says, her patients will sometimes say, hey, would you prescribe me some more allergy medicine? And she says, I'm really sorry, I can't. I need to send you back to your allergist or the primary care doctor who provided it, because I don't know this area or this science, and I could prescribe the wrong drug for you. And so it's what's medically responsible, medically ethical. And this is some of the stuff that just fueled me writing this book, because I was just so mad. It's just so contrary to what we believe about medicine. That's the biggest, the big shocker of this book, is and writing this book in this process was seeing how little evidence, how little training in various areas like diagnostic reasoning and risk analysis goes into medical education. And those medical schools and medical institutions are ultimately the ones responsible for turning out doctors who are scientifically and statistically illiterate and basically need to go by practice standards in order to treat you in many cases. Not all doctors are like this, but doctors don't have time to do what I do, which is I'm a nerd. I sit in this chair, all day and all night, obsessing, reading research. They have all these electronic medical record keeping requirements, and they see patients at Kaiser, chop, 20 minutes. And people want lives. I'm okay without one to a degree, but people go home to families or they go on dates, and that's to be expected. So you can't expect doctors to, stay at work and read studies into the evening. And then there's the problem of doctors not being trained to read studies, how to read them, how to evaluate them. And this is some of what we don't understand. There are these myths of medicine that we need to really disabuse ourselves of to be able to protect ourselves.
You're leading into my next question, but before I say it, I got to tell you, there are so many great lines in that book. I started trying to keep tally of them. What can I bring up in the interview? And the first one that really grabbed me was, and I'm going to read it here. It's like, science can't do its job, be a search for truth with a vigorous openness to being proven wrong when scientists' minds are made up like beds with sheets glued down. I thought that was great. And that's just like one of the tamer quotes from the book, I think. And I think if I have one critique for the book, it's like, you don't really tell us how you feel.
Right. Yeah. No, well, it was really important for me. And this is important as a nonfiction writer. If you're not honest with your readers, why are you writing? And so I expose everything when I'm stupid, when I've had some belief that wasn't appropriately skeptical, or when I was wrong. For example, in 2002, I'm 60. How old am I? 61. What year is it? I'm not going to do the math right now, but
you don't have to.
2002 was a long time ago, and I was a ways off from menopause. And the Women's Health Initiative study came out then. And this is what has caused just enormous medical myth to replace medical care. Because of the horrible methodological errors and distortions of that study. And so women like me, I thought, oh my God, I heard about it cursorily because it wasn't my thing then. But I thought, estrogen is safe. I am never taking estrogen. Hi, dummy. That's not scientific. And what happened was I had that belief going into this book, and I started to read, because you must read the science. And I thought, like, oh, you were wrong. And what happened with the Women's Health Initiative study that is so terrible, the dishonesty of these scientists, it's egregious. They announced, when they first announced this, they said that estrogen caused all these breast cancer, Alzheimer's disease, all these horrible things that they had found in the patients in their study. And what they said was, in healthy menopausal women. Well, that was a lie, because the women in their test, they were like in their 70s. I think it was up to age 79. What we've learned since then is that it's a critical window to take estrogen after menopause. And it's right after menopause. And if you're a healthy, just menopausal woman, estrogen at that time is safe, effective, but you really have to be healthy. You need to check out your arteries and, metabolic disease to really make sure, and then make an assessment based on your individual health metrics. And, it may be hard to find someone to help you do that, but ideally, more will become specialists in menopause and perimenopause as it's becoming a sort of hot topic. So, this study caused all these women to toss their estrogen prescriptions, others to not want estrogen, based on this distortion and dishonesty, and then doctors to refuse to prescribe estrogen to this day. And I have to tell you, it's so disturbing how little evidence is in our medical care. I'm just going through something with my provider. My wonderful gynecologist is gone till August. And so, I'm the rapid metabolizer. I got something done called pharmacogenetics, which will become a thing more and more. Somebody did this for me for free because of the work I do. And it was immeasurably helpful, because what I learned is what we don't know. How well do you metabolize this drug or that? So I'm a rapid metabolizer of steroids, which means I clear the hell out of them. There's a whoosh. So I'm not getting the steroids. If I take this amount, I'm not getting that amount that that woman over there would get, who's just a regular metabolizer. And then I have other issues too. So I'll just tell you, because people don't know this, I eat a carnivore diet, and I am just at my healthiest because of it. It's really important, especially as you age, to really go SWAT team on inflammation, insulin resistance. These are the things that basically cause you to rot and rust and die. Suffer. I can't do that. So I eat carnivore, and very strictly, I gave up bacon and pork rinds, just to be as clean as possible, because I had a corneal endothelioma. I know I sound like so what happens when you're eating this way, because of the low insulin, your sex hormone binding globulin skyrockets. Mine is so high. I mean, it could wave to the, it's 236. This is extraordinarily high. really, really high. And so binding, as in it binds with testosterone and estradiol, and whoosh, sails them out of you. Basically, they're not getting into your tissues because it locks them up. And so this is yet another problem. And then I take modafinil. You can probably tell I have ADHD, a little rambly, back and forth. And modafinil, it keeps airline pilots awake, and it's really helpful for my focus. And that tanks your estradiol level like 11 to 18%. So what my tests show is that I basically have almost like very little of the estradiol I take, and it's not treating my symptoms. And also what we've learned in recent years is that estradiol is protective of the cardiovascular system, of the brain, and of the bones. Especially the strongest evidence is for the bones, and then the others, cardiovascular, is coming along, and the brain. I see enough evidence that I am concerned about those areas, in terms of getting enough and getting estrogen early enough. Because, for example, with your cardiovascular system, at menopause, if you don't take estrogen, your own body's estrogen declines. There's some left at menopause, and it declines more and more. You lose the estrogen receptors in your endothelium. That's the arterial lining. And this is really important because estradiol protects your cardiovascular system very powerfully, as does progesterone, which is an ignored drug and hormone, which is really terrible and unfortunate. And I, in the book, I reference the work of this incredible endocrinologist, Geraldine Pryor. She's at UBC, and she's a wonderful site I want to recommend to women. It's called CEMCOR, CEMCOR, the Center for Menstrual Cycle and Ovulation Research. And then it's .ca, like it moves. And she fought and fought to have progesterone recognized, as an important force for women's health, and also to have perimenopause, that transition time to menopause, recognized for the unique, hormonally unique time it is. Whereas part of the unscience in gynecology and the treatment in perimenopause and menopause is that doctors treat perimenopause like menopause light, meaning they think it's just a time of declining estrogen, when that is anything but the truth. And the women who get the craziest, like I did, have estrogen that spikes and then dives. And this provokes stress hormone reactions. And that's why you go a little bit nuts. It's like drug withdrawal, the same kind of thing. They have the same symptoms, hot flashes, wired and angry, all of this. And so what's happened is that estrogen is proliferative, and it jacks you up, and you don't have its partner hormone, the second hormone of the menstrual cycle, progesterone. It's like the calm down hormone. It's the body's Valium, I sometimes say, to counterbalance it. So, if you're like me and you have, I think I had quite high estrogen in my perimenopausal years, because I had the 0.7 waist to hip ratio, the Barbie body. And that tends to be, estrogen driven, among other things. Anyway, it was the worst. I had terrible, terrible symptoms. About 10 or 15% of women are just floored, to the point where I suddenly began getting car sick. This is unbelievable. I got car sick and boat sick and everything as a kid, but you tend to grow out of this. And I did in my 20s and 30s. And then in my mid 40s, I live in Venice, and Santa Monica's it's like a mile and a half away. I would get car sick from Venice to Santa Monica, and I had to be support this community activist in some court thing. And I drove there, and I threw up on my shoes. I had to give someone else my time after I prepared something. And it was so unexpected. And this is one of the symptoms, nausea. And then I would, if I got really sick, vomited, I would be out for a week with sort of vertigo-like symptoms. It was really terrible. And so in women, the big problem in this area of perimenopause and menopause is that there are all these symptoms that each on its own, is just, oh, that's weird, that happened. But when you put them all together, women start to feel basically mysteriously unwell. There are all these things going wrong with them. It feels like you're falling apart. Like, this is old age. Now I'm just done. I'm 43 or whatever. And just like, okay, pack it in. You're going to suffer the rest of your life, because that's what it feels like if you have a terrible perimenopause. So because doctors are not trained in perimenopause, they don't know the symptoms. And what happens, one pernicious thing that Geraldine Pryor talks about, the endocrinologist, is that women seek diagnoses to explain all the horrible stuff going on with them. In my behavioral science writing and in these books that I've done before I took on medicine, I explained that uncertainty is one of the most disturbing feelings for humans. So we would prefer to, put a name on something rather than, it's so disturbing to us to not have any sort of, this is what it is kind of. And so women can get treated for diseases they don't have simply because they're so disturbed not knowing what they have. And that's why it's so pernicious that doctors don't know. Oh, I was mentioning something to head of gynecology. This is so terrible. At the big, Kaiser, I'm dealing with these two doctors who basically, one of them has menopause trainings, it's through the Menopause Society. They basically take an online course. It's not like me poring over thousands and thousands of studies and worried and what's the methodology here? And let me contact the statistician and see, I don't understand this. Like, I'm nuts. And that's it's a good thing because I turned out this book and I was very, very careful and got fact checked in it. But you have these people, they know medical ethics. She's the head of gynecology. She told me I should taper estradiol at 60, and I got really afraid she's going to take away my drugs. Okay, this is very old advice. And it was never, the science does not warrant this, number one. And, okay. And she told me, I love this when people say they read the science. Now, I was a little bit because I said to her, just sort of spouting off because I was upset that I had to meet. But I said the truth, which is that doctors are not trained to read the science. They're not trained to evaluate it, and they don't have time to read it. And she said, I read the science. I read the science on this. Well, no, she didn't. And in fact, not only did she not read the science, she didn't just read the easy bulletins from the Menopause Society. This was last week that I had this appointment with her, 2025. In 2022, and these people are late to the dance with a lot of stuff, the Menopause Society. They finally come out and say, oh, look, there's no stopping rule. You don't have to stop. It should be made based on, individuals' health with their doctor, looking at their health metrics and, their needs and values and everything, which is right. This is modern precision medicine. And she's telling me to taper. Well, okay. And I'm really scared because she has power. She's a gatekeeper, like an ignorant gatekeeper. And so, I explained to her, no listening on her part, where she said, I was saying, but you need to take estradiol into your later years because if you stop taking it at 60, you not only lose the protection you have for bones, it's very powerful for your bones. Your bones reverse, the health reverses. And the truth is when you need estradiol, to still be taking it is when you're 79. That's when we break bones, and we break bones through falling. You're taking two medications. You're clumsy. If you're me, you leave purple garden clogs in the middle of your floor. And, I'm just trying not to have a concussion and die before the book comes out. That would really suck, and so here's this head of gynecology. Oh, and she's in charge of doing the formulary for gynecology for Kaiser. And I thought that the woman who was head before, who I respect, who listened to me and listened to the science and agreed on my individual needs to give me the progesterone and cover it and everything. I thought that she was the boss. So I was writing this letter to say, this woman, she should recuse herself from choosing drugs for the formulary. Now, I don't have a grudge against this woman. She's a strong woman. I would like her if she were my friend or I encountered her at parties. But to have an ignorant gatekeeper, having power over what drugs you're able to take for your health, for symptom relief, this is a horrible, horrible thing. And so I wrote a 5,000 word rebuttal to my appointments with her and this other woman where they said all these things. It's the loosey-goosey, lackadaisical assessment of science. If they even read it, I don't believe that either one of these women has read the science. Andrew Gellman says, you can't expect them. He's a statistician. You can't expect them to read the science in medical school. They're not trained to do that. Gerd Gerenzer, who's big on risk, teaching about risk, he says there's a moral obligation to how to read the science. And that doctors, even if they don't have time to read all of it, they need to be able to look things up and not just willy-nilly say things. So this woman, the second one, she's younger and she's their supposed menopause expert. She tells me I should take testosterone. Okay, well, first of all, I'm not, if she looked at my stats, I'm not technically low in testosterone. What I recognize is that my free testosterone to total testosterone ratio is not what it should be because of the sex hormone binding globulin. But I corrected this in the responsible way. Now, not everybody can do this. This worked for me, and I understand. And DHEA, which is a supplement. And you have to be careful with supplements. I go to Consumer Lab to find out if they have rat hair and arsenic in them. It's a membership site, really worth it. But I use the DHEA, which is a hormone, to correct, this is my guess that I corrected and I got tested and it was corrected, correct my testosterone levels at least to a reasonable level. I don't know if they're still, reasonable because eating carnivore does such a number. Before I was just low carb. So this woman says, you should take testosterone. And I said, but it's not safe to take testosterone. Safety data just aren't there. I said, yes, they are. And she said she read the studies. Well, okay, maybe you read them and are unable to critically evaluate them. But we need to look for stuff like, have they tested this for a sufficient amount of time to know what are the effects on the cardiovascular system, on cancer, breast cancer? We don't know. And there's currently no FDA approved testosterone prescription for women. And the safest form for men is the pellet form. And women will sometimes get these from some sketchy compounding person or a pharmacy, but only the accredited compounding pharmacies should you ever use. And even then it's, maybe you're not getting, the same kind of drug you do, with everything that's wrong with the FDA, they regulate drug production. Except the ones from India just screwed, so avoid those drugs too. Catherine Eben, who's a colleague of mine, wrote a Bottle of Lies, Indian generic drug industry. So I'm rambling a little bit, but this woman saying this, and she said, I have friends that they're fellows in sexual medicine, and well, that's nice, but if they're telling you it's safe, they're wrong too. And this is the thing that I have discovered. I have respect on a scientific level for exactly one of my doctors. And because he's truly evidence-based, and he will also tell you, I needed a sleep drug at a certain point. Progesterone and menopause was not doing the job to keep. And I tested all these, every supplement with any kind of a bit of evidence pointing to it being legit for keeping you, helping you sleep. Nothing worked. And so what I didn't want to do is take benzodiazepines, Ambien, these drugs that can have terrible cognitive effects. And so I was testing these different drugs. And I asked him about then these new drugs, orexin receptor antagonists. And he just said, I don't know anything about them. And then he read about them. But that's the kind of doctor I trust where they say, I don't know. And not like my primary care doctor I left, where I said, well, how do you justify not giving me a C-reactive protein test, which is, it's to discover roughly inflammation in your body. Doesn't tell you it's there. It just tells you how inflamed you are. And he said it had no relationship to heart disease. Okay, I just wrote 3 chapters in cardiology, but and so I asked him, well, what's your justification? He said, because I'm the doctor and that's my clinical judgment. So my friend Susan named him Dr. God. And so he's gone now. But, this is such a common thing. It's the defensiveness of doctors who don't know, instead of having, when you do know things, you can be more secure. I'm good at 5 things, and then the other things I don't know. And I'll just readily tell you, I'm a financial moron. I should never, if there's stock that I think someone should buy, avoid it because the company will go out of business in a month. So I bought Bitcoin recently. I bought $2 worth and it's worth $2.9 going down to $2.70. I'm $1.70. So, my track record might change.
Well, we won't go through the 3 myths that you talk about in the book. We'll make people buy the book to learn more about that. But, all these statements you're making about doctors, it really surprises me that you're able to get Robert Lufkin to write the foreword for your book.
Oh, he's fantastic. So I've known him for all these years. It's so funny we both came to this place, but I actually I should find it in my book. I so admire him because he was a med school professor. He wrote a book called Lies I Taught in Medical School. Let's see if I can find this. Oh, I'm looking at a screenshot here. Okay, let me find this. I so admire this. Okay, so he said, This is a tweet from Rob Lufkin, a neuroradiologist, USC, UCLA, prestigious schools he taught at. He invented the Lufkin needle for biopsies during MRI scans. He said, I want to also add my apologies to all for the wrong advice I've given over the years when I recommended a low-fat diet and largely ignored the dangers of processed foods and refined carbohydrates. The great thing about science is that with enough evidence, we can change. Oh my God, I have chills. And I actually tweeted back, props for saying so. This is 2021. And this is the kind of doctor, a scientist you want, intellectual humility, willing to admit mistakes. It's just so important. And so that's integrity. And that's the sort of thing, that is missing from a lot of the defensiveness that I see with doctors where, because they're actually just going by practice standards, these guidelines given to them by medical societies or the institution, they're not that able to be nimble and make creative judgments. I don't mean creative, like let's give you, or something, but about, well, okay, what might be causing this problem you have, and how do we treat it? Which brings me, I want to just get into this thing that is another thing I dealt with recently. It's from Randy Nesse, who's at fault. He is the co-founder of evolutionary medicine and a psychiatrist, and he calls the viewing symptoms as disorders error. And this is where doctors, you come in complaining of a symptom and they treat the symptom. Well, that's not okay. If you have a headache, is it because you are stressed out, or do you have a brain tumor? If you have a brain tumor, we don't want to make your headache go away because it's like, turning off the fire alarm, like it's going to put out the fire. It's crazy. And so I went to a dermatologist who tested my ferritin level, and which is a form of iron loosely. Where does it fall? So I'm a little loose in that, but, and then told me I should take slow-fate iron. Well, wait a second. What if I have thyroid issues? What is causing the low ferritin? That needs to be figured out, because if I take that and I could damage my cardiovascular system. This is not okay. This is the most careless medicine, and it's routine. And this is the thing. I wrote this chapter 2 in my book, and this book, even though it's on menopause, there's a lot of stuff in there for guys. I'm not just being a shameless salesperson, but on diet and exercise, on the cardiovascular system, but also Chapter 2 I had to write is called Why You Won't Want to Believe, and Why You Should. Because as I had people read bits of my book, they were determined, they were so horrified at the unscientific medical care they're being given. They wanted to disbelieve. Katie, my old copy editor's wife for years and years at Creative Syndicate, she knows how careful I am on science, but she said, if I believe you, it's terrible. It means I can't trust my doctor. And then where are you? I can read a pile of science and go in and say, okay, we need to change my steroid prescription for my eye treatment to Lotamax from the prednisolone acetate, which has terrible systemic effects, and justify it and everything with good evidence. But most people, people use AI. AI lies. If you don't know medicine, don't ask ChatGPT. It will make stuff up. Make up citations. I had it alphabetized part of my bibliography. It dropped things and then just inserted studies that didn't exist. Mind blowing. So you were asking a question was it about the myths of medical care?
Yeah, I said I think we could just kind of let the readers go back to this, because I think you kind of addressed them all. And I'll read through them quickly now that we brought back to it. But myth 1 is doctors make decisions about drugs and treatments to give us based on scientific evidence. And you've talked about that.
That's
we know
myth,
that's
right?
not the case.
Yeah.
Myth 2 is doctors are highly trained in and skilled at diagnosis, the reasoning process to determine the underlying cause of pain. They're not worried about it. They're looking at strictly at fact. I've had my blood work done again. My cholesterol tends to be a little bit high, usually because I end up having meat or something the night before my blood work.
But wait a second. How are your triglycerides? That's what matters.
I think they're in the more normal range, but my LDL or my total cholesterol is in the 300s. But my HDL is 72, which gives me a HDL to total cholesterol ratio that it's on the high end of normal, but still in the normal range. I'm not denying that my cholesterol is high, but I've been looking at, okay, well, I know my sleep has been off and I haven't been able to lose weight. I could diet and my weight's not going anywhere. And just monitoring sleep and my stress level. I got a Garmin watch and I try and monitor all that. There are behavioral things I know I can do.
I have a suggestion for you, and that's very easy. And you might do this, but I just want to say the lipid hypothesis that cholesterol causes heart disease has not been proved. And it's looking more and more like it's starchy foods, sugary and starchy foods provoking insulin resistance and basically, elevated blood sugar, that these are the things that seem to provoke heart disease. And I have, my cholesterol is like 354 or something like that. I'm so happy because it's protective. High cholesterol is protective in women over 50. My triglycerides are 30. My HDL is 102. And this comes, I eat a carnivore diet and I take some supplements to make up for the few nutrients I don't get. But with my eye, because I had, my doctor gave me an overdose of corticosteroids because I didn't have time to read. I was doing stuff for the book. I basically fell into the car and fell onto the gurney. And, she stabs your eye. And so she's expert in that. But I didn't realize that there was a huge dose of steroids, and this gave me adrenal suppression where your immune system is basically not there. All these horrible effects. I have tachycardia and bradycardia in the same day. That's dangerously high, dangerously low heartbeats. As a person, my BP is like 99/62. I'm healthy. But so one of the things that I saw to do from the research was to get 10 minutes of the first morning light in your retinas. That helps your circadian rhythm, that helps you sleep, and it helps other processes in your body to be quite healthy. And so that's sort of like the healthy, but you get what I'm saying. And then also, you might consider whether you would be willing to low carb, a ketogenic diet, because if you want to lose weight, that's, and I write about this. I have all this in the book about how to eat a well-formed ketogenic diet, which is very important, where you are, for example, you'll need more salt. And so I put, because I eat carnivore, to maintain this salt in my body appropriately and potassium, the electrolytes, I put potassium through Morton Light salt in my water and then salt in my water, these two things. And it sounds disgusting, but you get used to it. Now I miss it if there's not salt in my water. And so, these are some of the things you can do, and never spending a day sedentary, and also doing weightlifting. This is what I talk about in the book too. Slow speed weightlifting. Just, you can do arms. And all I do one set a day, very slow speed to muscle failure. You do 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down. It's very cheap. And then the last one that you can do before you get all squirmy, and you can probably do one more where you think that is muscle failure. And what happens is you've created tiny tears in your muscles. And over the next day, they're repairing, and that's creating, healthy, quality muscle. And what's really important about this, number one, what you do for muscle, you do. It's sort of it's like a telephone thing. It gets there a little later, but and muscles and bone are metabolically active. So they actively work to reduce insulin resistance and inflammation when you're working them. And so I don't go a day without this. It's very important, these habits. I used to, when in perimenopause, I sometimes got migraines. That was the only reason I could get out of my push-ups in the morning, is if I was really dying. And that's important. It's just do it. This thing of your feelings, I wrote about this in my last book, your feelings are not the boss of you. Are you uncomfortable? Do you not want to do that? Get down to 220, and that's how you have to treat yourself. And it's sort of funny if you yell at yourself about these things, it makes it sort of more palatable.
Yeah, I teach exercise physiology, and it was funny, when I interviewed Dr. Lufkin late last season, I said, I probably should write a book, The Lies I Taught in Exercise Science class, because, I was raised, when I got my master's degree, and even to a certain extent still with the PhD, we were teaching, high carb, low fat diet and everything else. And it's like, oh my God, we were so wrong. And cardio. And it's like, now I'm like, you got to be lifting weights more. You got to, if you're going to eat carbs, you're eating them around your workout time. And that's
I would
the
differ
enemy.
with you on this. Stephen Finney, of Volek and Finney, two dietary researchers. He is an avid, near professional cyclist, and you can, he tested and then did the, work for him too, and of one, eating a low carb diet for potentiating exercise. And so I don't quite recall what his studies all said, but this is really important to look at because carbs, what I see is that for me, it's that I want to avoid eating things that cause me harm. And I can eat such a delicious grease log of that don't cause me harm. Carnivore is delicious. And so, eggs, I eat eggs and hamburger and salmon with seared crust on it and everything. And it's just, that's very exciting. And to forego the things that I enjoy, French fries or whatever. I see it as a positive thing of, I'm investing in having not suffering and good health in older age. And then to not be too ascetic, because you don't want to binge. When I go to a party, I'm like a scientist to try to assess them. I like with a microscope. It's really just my eyes, but I'm a chocolate chip cook expert of experts. And so it's like, were these made by a vegan with that horrible stuff that's not, butter and eggs and everything? Or are they made with like the real stuff? And then I'm assessing, is the white chocolate chip one? It's this thing. And so then I'll eat, I mean to eat one and I'll eat three because I'm a hedonistic kid when I admit that. But so this is how I, manage. I'm mostly not eating any sugar or flour, and then I eat at home. So I'm eating butter and ghee. And these are the healthiest forms of fat that you can eat. Ghee has a high, whatever it's called, has a high smoke point. So you can sear meat and fish with it without it burning like butter. And it's just delicious. And then I eat, because I'm eating carnivore, I'm not eating carbs. What I do is I eat butter off the stick. Oh. It's delicious. I love it. And I'm not getting fat from this because I'm not having the carbs, and my, insulin's not, seesawing all over the place. And you really don't want to have that. Basically what happens is a broken blood sugar response later in life, where there's so much back and forth, insulin working, to bring down the blood sugar, and it eventually, in many people, that breaks. And then you're left with the inflammation, which is low-grade inflammation, there's basically like a low-grade fire in you all the time. And so what happens is when your immune system is needed, hey, send out the warriors, the little white blood cell to like deal with this injury here. They're tired, they're burnt out. And so that's a really vital thing to not have happen, because you need that. As you get older, I'm 61, you see that you're much less robust. I got a bruise on my foot. I wrote about this, I think, in the book, unless I cut it. I had this bruised toe. It was black once. An old me, bruise. Okay. Oh, it's better tomorrow. And this is the sort of thing that you see that's scary. And then I also look at, it's tragic. The old people, like where I go get my eye treatment from my eye surgeon for this, it's a genetic disease called Fuchs dystrophy, really obese. And you can see these people, tremendous suffering throughout their day. And that's pretty good incentive. I just wish that they hadn't been sold the bill of goods with the standard American diet with government commission and these two fraudsters, what's his name, Hegstad, and then Fred Stair at Harvard, who scammed the American public on the take from Big Sugar, saying that, sugar's fine. It's those, it's meat and all the things that are actually healthy for us, that are bad for us. And so they turn the American public unhealthy it's disgusting.
Yeah, I think we agree on the information that the medical community has given us over the years. And I spend a lot of time in class. I teach a pathophysiology and exercise class, and we really deal with, this is what the medical community says, but this is what we can be doing. And it's pretty simple. I mean, you really bring it down to eat a healthy diet, exercise, get good sleep, maintain a healthy body composition, don't smoke, and have healthy social connections. And
absolutely. Yeah. That's so important. And I encourage people also, when you're feeling terrible, there are times people want to isolate, but I find, and it is a thing for people, that social connection is so part of our evolutionary history and such a healing thing. Call somebody. And I mean, I would make myself, I got depressed during COVID in maybe April of whatever, 20. I couldn't even dial the phone, but I found my friend Catherine, and she always makes me feel better. And she did. And then also to move when you're feeling down, because one of my books is on embodied cognition. It's a book with they all have F words, except for this one, on F wordology. And what that is, it's how the mind is bigger than the brain, and that emotions and actions are actually bidirectional. So you can change your emotions with your actions, and your actions change your emotions. And so what I made myself do, because our brain's kind of miraculous and marvelous, but stupid, is that I realized the brain thinks that, being all head up from exercise is like being all head up because you're excited. And there's social science in this area that's very interesting. And so I made myself get on this exercise bike. I Wicked Witch of the West. I didn't want to do it, but it's like, I actually talked to myself, are you paralyzed? No. And get the hell on the bike, and that helps. And it's just, it's the sort of stuff that you need to sort of parent yourself on, And the one thing I wanted to mention about exercise, this is another terrible thing about these medical, institutions. It's the institutions, the doctors, it's both medical education and the institutions that are at fault. I mean, I get angry just because, well, I think I would read the science, but you can't make those determinations and people get to have lives. But here's the thing. They recommend at Kaiser all over the place to eat this low-fat diet, which is not satiating, not healthy, doesn't have adequate nutrients. And then, I love this, to walk for osteoporosis. Okay, that's worthless because you're not putting enough weight on your bones to tell them, like, hey, yoo-hoo, we're going to be needing you. Better, bulk up bones and muscles. And especially for elderly people, it's called sarcopenia, muscle wasting. You don't want that. All of this is connected with the insulin resistance and the whole body just going to pot. And, it takes very little to, in terms of I can be thin, and not everybody, is metabolically the same, but I can eat. I don't count a calorie ever. I eat when I'm hungry, and I can do relatively minimal exercise, doing slow speed weight training. And then I do a bit of cardio because I'm in a chair all day and I need to move. So I run, but I run in front of the TV and then I run outside, to get the circadian rhythm, 10 minutes. I'm in California, so it's, so just 10 minutes is okay. But people overcast areas might have to do 15. That's very important. And these things are just sort of minor, and you can be, the benefits from dividends from just doing these things, being attentive to these areas. But yet, doctors, they're telling patients with diabetes, oh, here, have pudding. All these, they feed diabetics at the hospital. This mind-blowing, insane. Like this woman's mother, diabetes, terrible diabetes. She's on Twitter, which is my social world right now. They fed her more sugar for breakfast than I eat in a year. It's great, pancakes and dessert and all this stuff. And she's hospitalized with some kind of horrible attack. It's mind-blowing, all of this.
I'm trying to remember who told me that on the Diabetics Association's website, they actually have a recipe for pudding.
It's so insane. It's so insane. Oh, here's another thing too. That's a huge pet peeve of mine, not a pet peeve. So people of color, we're all, we're mostly the same, all of us. But so people related to menopause and perimenopause, the white middle-class women are most of the research subjects. So some of the research applies, but not all of it. And it's the same throughout medicine. So Black people tend to have, I think it's 20% lower triglycerides. And I think it's 17% higher HDL. So you can miss, if you're looking at those metrics based on what what the metrics for me would be as a person who's white walls or not even, well, then you're not treating your Black appropriately. And same Hispanic women, they are prone to a horrible kind of breast cancer. If your name is Lopez or Rodriguez, you can't always tell someone has Hispanic origins, but, and we should be attentive to you. The doctor should notice that and say, hey, you might be prone to this, and there are false positives. There are all sorts of problems with overtreatment. But I saw a thing, Scripps Health, and it was some page saying, hey, Black women, pay attention to your cardiovascular health. Do you think they gave the stats for Black women? No. And then also there's a cluster of 5 metabolic conditions that tell you your risk is raised for cardiometabolic diseases, and they're high blood sugar, high blood pressure, visceral fat, which is that when you have belly fat, that it's basically around your organs. Really,
I call that Dunlap's disease. It's where your belly Dunlap over your belt.
What did you say?
I call it Dunlap's disease. That's where your belly Dunlap over your belt.
And I love that. And then the other things are, let's see, what are the other two? High blood pressure, high blood sugar. Okay. Missing one of them. High triglycerides and low HDL. Right. And so if you are a white person and you have 3 of those, that suggests you have elevated cardiometabolic risks, so for heart attacks, diabetes, and all these conditions, stroke. If you're a Black person, 2 out of those, that suggests elevated risk. This needs to be explained. It's malpractice to not treat people as individuals in these meaningful ways when we have this information. Same as the gynecologist. Oh my God, the 5,000 word rebuttal that I had to write about all the stuff they got wrong, because I want to lay that out. It's not right that they don't know this stuff. but they're denying me. I want an increase in my estradiol prescription since I have this high SHBG. I rapidly metabolize the estradiol, and then I have the modafinil tanking my estradiol levels further. And these have been tested. So we see it's not like I'm just guessing this stuff. And they're refusing that. They said the head of gynecology tells me it's a super physiologic dose that I'm asking for. It might be in someone who is not Amy Alkon, but in me, it's what would be necessary to protect me. I'm like 61. I've been in menopause I still have hot flashes, and I've had symptoms that have come back because of it's medical harm. It's called iatrogenesis, when a doctor means to help you, but they harm you. That's the cortisol, where the doctor gave me a corticosteroid overdose for my eyes. These drops, they go systemically, crazy, and this woman, head of gynecology, and she's saying this, and I explained to them, look, here are the reasons. And so treating an individual means giving them, treatment according to their individual, and this is something that's just not done. And doctors, there's a defensive medicine is being practiced. And that's when doctors, they don't know. They're ignorant of something. And ignorant is such a rude word, but it's the case. She's ignorant, of this tapering at 60, all this stuff that she put forward in my appointment, and then they deny you care out of, either they'll give you excess care or insufficient care based not on what is best for you, but based on their need to protect themselves from being sued. And then also less malevolently, doctors don't want patients to come back in. My transplant surgeon, she's wonderful, despite, she doesn't know about steroids. And there's a reason she shouldn't be expected to. They should have experts in that area. But, she doesn't want patients coming back and crying in her office that they're losing their vision in the planet eye. This is horrible. And it's a privilege. Someone gave me donor tissue. This is why I'm an organ donor. I started to cry when she told me I get donor tissue for my eye. And, my mother had this disease too, by the way. So thanks, Mom. And so I can understand that she doesn't want those patients coming back. And then on a careerist level, you don't want your surgical record to be, a bunch of these failed. So, there are reasons for this, but that doctor, knowing steroids takes and careful prescription of them and all the parts of the body that are related. This is a whole huge transdisciplinary area to understand. And it is unreasonable. She's an elite eye surgeon. It is unreasonable to expect her to keep up on the stuff in her field. And you really want her to, because remember, she's sticking an X-Acto in your eye. And then also understand the whole area of steroids and everything related, the neuroscience. It's called, touching my head, it's called the HPA axis. That's what's malfunctioning in me because of the overdose she gave me. That's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And there's signaling that goes on. And she basically suppressed my immune system by this idea that in their field, when they do these corneal endothelium transplants called DMEC surgery, it's the least rejected there is of transplants because you don't have blood vessels. It's not vascularized in your cornea. So you're less likely to reject. It's like 0.7% possibility of rejection. And probably the metabolic healthy patients are the ones who reject it, and so, the steroids area, the field, it's just out of clinical habit. They think it's evidence-based that they prescribe 4 drops for a day after your surgery to keep your inflammation down and help you hang on to your transplant. But it's just based on clinical habit. And nobody compares, what about this or that? And these steroid drops are pernicious. And here's the other thing. This is how unscientific medicine is. They give you a Kaiser and other places too. You get these prednisolone acetate drops and then antibiotic with back preservatives in them, BAK. Parabens are also bad in eye drops, but they're about to ban these in Europe. And they begin to destroy your cornea in a matter of days. This is like, we got to destroy the village to save the village. We're just destroying the village. And so I'm sorry. I would prefer not to take those. Also, dry eye and the stuff that makes it even harsher for me. And this is this unquestioned thing. I had asked a doctor there before I got to the cornea surgeon, an appointment with a cataract guy. He had prescribed me eye drops and they had preservatives. And I said, can you prescribe some without preservatives? And he said, Are there such a thing? Hey, do I need to be the medical genius in every area? And I say that with, sarcastically. I didn't know. So he says it to me. So I'm like on the phone and like with the pharmacy and like asking some pharmacist and like looking things up. Like, why is this my job? I can do it. And I did, and I had to, but like, this is insane. The problem is, if you're not me, I'm a psychotic nerd. I will exhume a body from like 1940, who died in 1943. The scientist died with one holding his paper and his cremains or whatever's left. He's still got the paper that shreds. I'll have him exhumed to read that paper. But, is it too much to expect that our doctors would just be basically evidence-based? And again, not all, are this way. I told you my psychiatrist, wonderfully evidence-based. He uses pharmacogenetic testing. I didn't even know Kaiser had that, but he does it because it's important. This allows you to know what someone's genetics are, as I had mine done, to know, how do you metabolize this drug? Does this drug work for you? Do you need more of this drug? What drugs don't work for your genetics? These various liver enzymes. And it's so important. And so he's providing the most individualized care to his patients. It's really, really important, especially with mental health stuff. There are people who have, I love the bright lines of mental. You have bipolar disease. My God, they have to do that to give them drugs like the DSM, this mess of a Bible of the additions. But, people don't have bright lines around disease. They have this symptom or that symptom. And there's this attempt to name it something. And then the insurance will then pay for, okay, we, give you this drug for this. But that's not scientific, and it's not good medicine in many cases to just, have to settle on a diagnosis of something specific when, this and that and the other thing in a kitchen sink are involved.
So how do you think patients, especially women, can better advocate for themselves in the system that seems to lack solid evidence and treatments for?
I'm so glad you asked that. First of all, it's really important. So we women tend to be more timid, especially in our younger years. Not all. I have these badass friends. But I had no friends until I was 15. And so I was kind of a suck up and really wanted to be liked. And I worked on that. And now I'm a bitch to the deserving. But so, women tend to feel it's rude, more so than maybe men, to ask for a second opinion or to say, wait, I didn't understand that. But what I emphasize in the book is that you owe it to yourself, to your health, that to stand up like that. And if you look at this is some of the stuff I talked about in a previous book, where it's like your feelings are not the boss of you. So yeah, is it uncomfortable to go over and, go pitch your idea to that guy? Yeah. Okay, can you survive a minute and a half of discomfort? I think you can. And so say you do that and you go over and you fail and he humiliates you or something. Okay, well, so there's a way to look at that. Small wins. You were brave. Yesterday you wouldn't have done that. Today you did it. You grew a pair. That is so cool. And the more you do that, the more you see that, the idea that something bad is going to happen is ridiculous and stupid. And then you get more and more brave. And so women with their medical care need to, and people, it's not just women, need to accept that moment of discomfort. It's not rude. It's actually you advocating in the most important way for your health. And so, you can say there's a thing called informed consent. So it's that you need to understand a treatment before you can agree to it. Well, uninformed consent is not a thing. And if the doctor hasn't explained it well enough, that needs to be explained to you, and it might take another appointment. Kaiser has these 20-minute appointments. You get the bum's rush maybe at the end. I find that doctors tend to stay with you if it's necessary. I don't bash doctors in this book. I feel that they're also betrayed by this medical system. Although I think, I get angry with the irresponsibility of gynecology doesn't know. Everything she said to me was wrong. And so with this, that you need to say, I don't understand this. I don't understand this. Can we make another appointment? And then there are 6 questions that I came up with because I think it's good to have them written down. I said, if you're like me and your memory goes into hiding when you're under the slightest bit of stress, it helps to have a list. You can put it on your phone. So these are the 6 questions to ask your doctor before agreeing to treatment. Can you lay out your reasoning behind your diagnosis and the treatment you recommend? Remember Dr. God? Because I'm the doctor and that's my clinical judgment, not an answer. And could there be other conditions that are causing my symptoms? They should do this thinking, but you can't count on them to do it. So when they give you these answers, that tells you how evidence-based your medicine is, or whether you're getting this sort of symptoms as disorders error from your doctor and your diagnosis. Are there risks from this? What are my risks from this treatment? Are there safer, less invasive alternatives? What can I expect during the treatment, and what sort of recovery? And do I need to do this now, or could I wait or go without the treatment? And so, this is really important. And your doctor needs to explain this in plain language. And if they can't and won't, it's expensive for people to get medical care, but, this is your health. And it seems to me, it's important to get a second opinion, if that's at all possible for you. It's really, really important. And to find another doctor. At Kaiser, you can just change doctors, which is great. I left Dr. God, and before him, there was like Dr. God the first, these people who are covering for not knowing things or arrogant and treat you as if you're, like disrespectfully as a patient. And you don't have to know the stuff that I know to like to like have the evidence-based medical care. You need a provider who's going to be honest with you on these levels, or where you see the stuff that they're answering these questions using to answer, showing that this really isn't based in anything. And so you may need some time, to assess what they say. What people should do is also understand that their timetable is not yours. You don't have to make snap decisions. It's your medical care in your body. You can wait on it. Talk to friends who are, make good counsel, look things up. But you have to be careful, because a lot of the stuff online, I know this because I know the science. You see stuff and it's just BS. And then the AI lies. And so if you don't know the medicine, I wouldn't use ChatGPT, because it really just makes stuff up. And I use it sometimes because I need to remember what was the thing? Which part of that? What's it called? And then it'll remind me, and I'll know if it's wrong. The horrible thing about this is that basically my friends Gary Taubes and Nina Teicholz were some of the first people writing these low carb books. And then Michael Eads and Mary Dan Eads were providers in Arkansas, helped like 10,000 people get unfat. So all these people, launched this a low carb wave and explain where the science was bereft in the medicine, where it was missing. And I do this in perimenopause and menopause. And the truth is, we really need outsiders like me, or can even be an insider if they have an objective view and are willing to look at warts and all, to take on these subjects and say, here's where the science lies. Because I tell you, every area, I did not need this lesson in the endothelium area. This is my eyesight. I have been so sick for like a month, and I had to fight for tests that I know I need. I had to get the head of endocrinology to prescribe the test for me, because the other gynecologist or endocrinologist said they didn't have this test called the synecdothine test, where they stimulate your, basically they want to see what your cortisol is doing. If you're a hormone from your pituitary can get your cortisol out of the grid. And, and so the idea that a facility like Kaiser wouldn't have this, all the diabetic and very sick patients they have. If it's a outhouse in a cornfield in Idaho repurposed as a medical clinic, okay, I believe it then. Of course they have it. And this is the kind of thing that you deal with. And unless you have the information on the other side, which books like this can tell you, Gary's and Nina's, with appropriate skepticism, it's sort of like you're screwed. Like, I don't know hematology, that's blood. I know a little bit about it because I know the immune system. So that's an area where if something happened, I would need massive amounts of reading, but I can't do that. That's why we need books like this, because it gives you some idea. And I want to just warn, though, there's a thing I call amazeball science. Like, oh my God, it's so fantastic. This thing, it just like, your cancer will become like, butterflies and fly out of your brain. It's just the perfect, great, unbelievable, quote unquote science. And it's really important to look to see that somebody is skeptical. For example, Gary Tubbs, oh my God, he's the most nervous person about concluding anything. And so he's my scientific big brother, because he's a great role model for not making unwarranted leaps. And so I looked to him as a role model for that. And then, who else was I thinking? But so in my book, it is so disturbing to me to not give women answers, because we're all afraid. So in the breast cancer chapter, at the end, I say, I'm really sorry. You want to have this answered. So does estrogen cause breast cancer? And the research is to what's called heterogeneous. This group of women was tested with this drug and that drug and everything. And, there are just so many problems with it. We just can't conclusively say. And so I tell people, where I lie on this, I have a risk of breast cancer, but women, 1 out of 5 women will die of heart disease right now. And very soon, 1 out of 3 breast cancer usually die of heart disease. And like 90% of breast cancer is curable. That's horrible disease. You don't want it. Chemotherapy, it's just ruinous and horrible. But what's most important, if you have to have a trade-off for me, and everyone cannot just follow what I do, because this is me taking into account my individual health metrics, and most people help them with that. Oncologists are actually the one doctor that can probably assess risk better than the rest of the doctors. Really are not good at it. And, I'm able to do that, but the answer isn't just follow what I do, but to make a reasoned decision with somebody to help you about where your individual risk lies and where it's important to in terms of trade-offs.
So you've said you don't write for saints of discipline. I really love that statement. I
write for the mere mortal like me. My friend Steph says I'm not lazy, but I am a lazy hedonistic pig. If I have ice cream in my house, my little Amy Alkon snout will be right in that. It's going to just dive. There will be none left. And so I just work things out so I'm able to have doable initiatives for my health. So this is something, as an advice columnist, that was a real big part of my practice. First of all, I never gave advice, which is funny as an advice columnist, but if you tell people what to do, it causes psychological reactance, and so, which is a rebellion. But, so when writing my column, however, I would, there'd be the thing that I would say would be like the third paragraph, like near the end, where it would be, a suggestion of you might do this, or, this is a way to something. I put it in those indirect terms. Excuse me, I almost sneeze. Okay. Maybe I'm not going to sneeze. False alarm. And so what I would ask myself is hey, Alkon, I think there was profanity involved. Is anyone going to do this? Is anyone going to keep doing this? And if the answer wasn't yes, well, it's well, you idiot, go back to the drawing board, jerk. And that's the thing with, the how to eat and how to exercise. And when I talk to people, I do private sessions with people. I have no qualification. I'm not a trainer. But I'm really good at this because I have one session with somebody and I help them fix things and figure out how they're going to fail and manage all that psychologically and otherwise. But, it's this thing of well, okay, who are you? What are your values? What works for you? So I talked to my agent about, ways to eat, but she says kids, teenage boys, gorillas, like a buffet. And they eat so much food. So she makes chicken thighs for them because it's you can afford them. For children who eat insane amounts of food. And so I don't eat chicken thighs, even though they're so delicious, because they're very high, sadly, in omega-6 fatty acids. And you want to have more omega-3, and that's in the salmon and other things I eat. But so, I quit them. But, so she needs to still serve those. And there are people who are just not willing to stop everything, or they want to go out for drinks and, and still live a certain life. So you work things out for them, what's doable. And you also help people manage failure. We all fail. We suck. We just, we mean to do something and we don't quite do it. And then we feel really bad. And the important thing is to have self-compassion for when you fail. You're going to fail. And so you need to accept that. It's not, that you're a horrible person or anything. This is just being a human being. And I like the self-compassion thinking of Kristen Neff, who's a researcher in that area, where she says, your failures are what connect you to other humans. And so that sounds like the thing is our brain, it's really, like I said, kind of dumb. You can just tell your brain a story and it'll believe, and that's how they implant memories in these people, whatever, and crazy stuff. And, repeat the story and you repeat it and it becomes real to you. But so that's really important. And then, to have, for example, systems instead of goals. A goal, and this is also in my last book, systems are things that are overreaching, strategies. I'm going to take care of myself in later life and live this wonderful, robust life. I'll be me, but just a little more, in need of iron, and not suffering and sick. And so that's the system. And the goal is, well, I'm going to eat perfect A, or I'm going to, I'm going to or hike 20 miles or something like that. And if you don't do that, then you fail. You can fail, at meeting your goals, but your systems are ongoing. And so that helps you sort of amortize failure, and then also the other thing is that when you do that, that helps you not just say, throw up your hands the way people stop going to the gym. Oh, I didn't go yesterday. I wasted some money last month. I'm just not going to go because I feel bad about not going. And just be honest about that and laugh. I laugh at what a ridiculous, fallible, dummy human I am. Those things you do where you think like, oh, I bet that is still good, that food. And then you're like over the toilet. These things where you knew better. You knew better not to open that thing that you knew was going to like explode all over the counter with like the dog kibble, and so laughing at that helps you not be such a recriminating, hard person on yourself. And then to really work out, well, can you do this? How do you make this doable so you're not feeling like you failed? And then do you want to extend yourself a little and do a little more and a little more? And the thing about building habits is that the more you do, first it's uncomfortable. The more you do it, the more it becomes normal. And so like for me, I had to stop eating bacon because I needed to go SWAT team on inflammation because of this corneal endothelium transplant. And so the first day I had herring with butter that I heat in the microwave. It's actually quite good. The smoked herring, little tins, inexpensive on Amazon. I was sort of like, well, this is kind of a bummer. But then I'd done it and was sort of like, well, this is tasty and like, okay, whatever. I have those pork rinds. I still have 2 of the big jars I ordered that are up there. They look at me. I'll take them to a party so I don't, because it's more important to me to not have inflammation. And so it's these sort of things, that are important to do, like to be forgiving to yourself, but also to set up habits. And there's this great advice from Mary Dan Eads, one of the authors of Protein Power. These 2 doctors, they're my friends. They're really great on evidence, and, the low carb, they're like the first, along with Dr. Adkins. And she says to her patients, or when they were practicing in Arkansas, okay, I want you to try something. You try this for 2 weeks to be faithful to a low carb diet, just for 2 weeks. And then if you don't like it, be disciplined, be faithful, then you can stop. And this is what happened with me. We were taking the book cover photo for I See Rude People, which was 4 books ago, not many books, because it's a painful process each time. So I had, as I mentioned, my snout in a vat of ice cream for all of March. And I was like, uh-oh, a camera adds 10 pounds. And so from being friends with Gary Taubes, I knew that I could just lose weight if I just like cut out everything but like meat and eggs and black coffee. And I did. But also I felt so good from this, that I just kept going with it. And that's the thing, like how habits start. You get used to it. And like just accepting the discomfort is just such a big part of it. And I like to talk to myself. It's like there's a friend there and it's funny. The thing of like, come on, don't be such a wussy. You can do this. Like, okay, whatever. And that's really like to have things be amusing and not just grim. That really helps too. So these are some of the ways where you can make exercise and diet work for you, that maybe you're not going to go to 100%, but maybe you go to 65% or 85%. And then maybe you try going a little further. And the more you repeat a habit, there's a line, neurons that fire together, wire together. It's actually Carlos Schott's, paraphrasing Donald Habib became the original. I love that though, because it's very descriptive and important. It's that when your neurons, in this neuron, you do some action, this neuron fires, and then you do some other action, this neuron fires, and then they begin firing at the same time. And then the set of actions becomes sort of automatic. And so this is a very important thing to understand in terms of like your habits become habits. The things, the actions become habits. And so it's also the social support you mentioned. This is such an important, when you tell other people you're doing something, you don't want to be a liar. So you're more likely with the eyes upon you to follow through. And also it really helps if 2 people are doing something, if they're, I write with my friend Steph and Moon, write on Google Hangout, my computer on mute. And I just look back at my finger. It's so sexy. And they'll be doing their little writer things too, and I'll work more because they're there. And my friend, I had been yelling at her to do weight, do this slow speed weight training. And so she got her husband to do it with her. Now they're going to the gym and they're building, lift like do 10, go upstairs, and they sometimes do more. And so this is now socially supported. It's something that they do together. And this really helps. So all those things that can help you manage habits. Another one, this one from my friend Art Markman, who's a psychologist. It's just great. So I wasn't taking my vitamin D in the morning. I was forgetting. And so I thought, okay, let me take Art's advice, which is build a habit into your environment. So how do I build that in? Okay, the first thing I do in the morning, grind the coffee beans. So I put the vitamin D bottle in the coffee beans. So I had to go through the vitamin D to get to the coffee. And so I, in less than a week, I thought about that. I remembered, I woke up, got to take my vitamin D, and it became a thing. And so those are some of the things that we use to get around, our mere mortalhood. And recognizing that really helps. You have to know that you're screw up in order to deal with it.
So what do you want the readers to take away from Going Menopostal? Menopostal. I have a wrong thing in my notes. Going Menopostal, which is the cleverness of the title. It doesn't make any sense, Going Menopostal.
No, that's leave me. Yeah. So, I want them to, number one, have the science that I wrote. This is the thing that was really important to me, right? I have this note here, write every page of this book for Pamela D. She's my bus driver and she's smart, but she doesn't read science. She's just a normal, smart person, sharp, tough. I really like her. So I wrote this book, in language that, if I'm saying something, there are these things that you say when if you don't have a PhD and you get a little insecure, where it's like, is this here because it's important for your readers or because you want everyone to know you're really smart? And that's the jerk stuff. I say a worse word about that, the a-hole stuff. And so it's like, and I yell at myself and I cut that stuff because it's not helpful to readers. So I want people to use the information in here, written in this clear language, to go ask their doctors for evidence-based care. And then I also, let's be realistic. Hi, can I have this drug? No. So what I do, however, in this book is that I give women fail-safes for not being turned down. Now, you may be turned down, but this is more helpful. So like to take your first morning temperature. This is a thing that tells you, there are whole directions in it. This comes from Geraldine Pryor, the endocrinologist, quantitative basal temperature taking. It's not for fertility. This is to figure out whether or not you have the temperature elevation that shows that you're making progesterone and for an adequate number of days. And if you're not, this is unhealthy and you probably can't sleep. That is the single best excuse, by the way, not excuse, but if you go to your doctor, we need sleep. What, they're going to deny you sleep? And you bring this data. This is legitimate medical data, first morning temperature collected, because it shows you, and especially if you do it for a period of months, to show if there's a pattern there that you're not ovulating. That's what it shows. And not ovulating means no progesterone because there's no sac rupture and no litter to make progesterone out of. And so your doctor, how are they going to deny you sleep? And you can protest those things. It's just, it's hard to do. And I try not to have. So that's the thing. And then to basically have the language to partner with your doctor, not to antagonize them, but to, listen to them and be respectful of them. And then also put your point forward. And then if you're not able to get a science-based medical care out of them, as you see in the book, according to your values, well, then you can go to another provider. And that may be hard if you don't have money. There are also, here we have the Venice Free Clinic and places like that. So it may be difficult, but it's worth work to protect your health. And also you can file complaints about the way a doctor is treated if you feel that they are negligent. And I think that being realistic about medical care, but also there are some other things, not just to get the medical, to use the lifestyle elements. I looked at basically reverse engineering from the cell. What are the healthiest ways to eat and exercise based on, what we want to happen in our cell and what are the most powerful and efficient? I'm not doing manual labor, for an hour with iron bars. This is ridiculous. That's the most boring thing. So I have this little weight graveyard in my house over there in my living room, and I'll do one set a day or sometimes more of this weightlifting and muscle failure. It's painful at the end, but it's like one set, and what you do once you do, this is something I'm sure you don't have to work every single muscle. Like, let me get my right tone. That muscles, when you're working a bunch of muscles, they transmit the muscle health throughout your body. And so and then eating in ways that are truly healthy, that do not provoke inflammation, insulin resistance. This is something also that people, and while it's delicious, and I also am lazy, so I do not cook. I heat. I write books. Like, you write the book, like I have a book right here. There's lunch. There's a plate over there. It's done. It's gone. So why would I spend all my time on something that's just gone?
Right.
And that's how I see it. And other people, like to cook it. But so basically I eat things that you can flip, like 2 steps, flip, that's, steak, salmon, whatever. And like those kinds of things make your life doable, make you able to be healthy. The realisticness. Being realistic about what is possible for you as a mortal. And these are the things. And then if you do all of this, the end of my book, I throw off the stigma of aging. Women at a certain age, you become invisible. It's the worst thing. It's the craziest thing. Before, you'd have all this attention, and suddenly 58 or it's like 60. All of a sudden, you don't exist on a certain level, because of the way we evolved. Men prioritize physical beauty, and women prioritize providers, which doesn't mean that we look only for, but men throughout their lifespan are attracted to women in their 20s, which is kind of 60. And so these are things that you can't help but affect you. But if you understand it through that, then it's not personal. I know this from the psych research I've read. The thing is, if you're healthy, I have a chapter, Old is the New Black, about throwing off the stigma. I go around, I probably said I was 60 or 61. For one in March, I sometimes forget and say 60. But I go around telling people my age, like the guy who went to Harvard, who's like, lets you know that before you lick the salt off your martini olive at a cocktail party, and the reason for that is that I refuse to accept that aging, the stigma that is placed on women who age. I'm old. I'm fabulous. I have fun all the time. I'm a much better person than I was in my younger years. More courage, wiser, kinder, all these things. And so I wouldn't go back, and you see all these. The amazing thing is that because we're living longer and are able to be healthier, despite all the horrible diet malpractice you've been foisted, people have like second careers, like later in life, or like 4th or 5th, and they're doing things that they always wanted to do, going off and living somewhere else, volunteering. And my friend Debbie Levin, I met her because I sold my column to the alternative weekly newspapers, and she was there selling Callahan cartoons. And so that was what she did. She represented animators and everything. And Judd Callahan, my late friend, the cartoonist. And then now, oh my God, she is a talented, artist doing ceramics, and her ceramics are just sought after. Interior designers buy them. All these stores want them, and she's truly, it's not just, decorative. It's really, it's art. It's so beautiful. And it's so exciting to see her thrive like that, with this totally career number 2, going gangbusters. And that's the thing that I see a lot with women, at this age, and what's possible, especially if you're. And so that's the thing that is possible. That's the end result, to have this great, robust, fun life where you're just you, but wrinkled and running off to Paris or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think 61 is old. Well, I just turned 62 last week.
Oh, so. You are? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it feels old when you have these things that go wrong with you. I used to be able to see across the street, read a matchbook across the street back when I was 20 and there were matchbooks. And now, oh my, I hate these people. Whoever does the bottle, Tylenol, I have to photograph it and blow up the photograph. Really, this drug will kill you if you, if you drink coffee and take it. Okay, we're all dead because you're terrible people or older. But see, I don't mind old. I call myself old. I'm just offended when I go to an extreme nerd meetup group where we debate science and other readings and everything. And some guy asked me if I were my friend's. He's 40. And so that's not my self-image. I don't have kids. And so I was so deeply, I realized I could be his mother, which is sort of weird because I don't have the self-image of being as old as I am. I feel like myself at some other age, 8. But it's just when these things, go wrong with you where you're, wait a second, my eye, wait a second, my eye is getting like, basically what happens, like you get little, the cells die and it looks like pounded copper in there. And then you go, opt out. Thank you. and not all of this happens with age. But those kinds of things, sort of lead you to remember all those people, the old people who said, you need to value your health. You'll miss your health when it's gone or something when you're 20. Like, yeah, okay, whatever. Not that I'm unhealthy on that level, but the lack of robustness is just important. So that's the reason why, you don't just wait. What people do is they wait until, the house is on fire to buy the fire extinguisher. And this is normal. You just think, okay, well, I'm fine now. My cardiovascular system is not exploding. But what's happening is that the disease is progressing. Atherosclerosis is progressing, the plaqued up arteries. And you don't reverse that. And so it's best not to have the irreversible disease that's, taking off like a little choo-choo. Like, okay, we're going to kill you now slowly, but it's going to happen. And it just takes these steps, and we know what the steps are. And so what I would urge others to do who are nerds, take on hematology, take on these other areas. People need to write these books. You need to know how to criticize and look critically at the medicine and the research. And that takes a certain kind of person. But we need this for other areas of medicine because the questions aren't being asked. You just look at the eye area. They give these steroids that are absolutely terrible. Well, what are other drugs? Why are people all taking prednisolone acetate when there are other drugs that have less systemic effect? And then cortisone, corticosteroids, they destroy your bones. They do so much damage in the body. And you see doctors willy-nilly like, here, let me inject you, and they don't tell patients the risk. So that's the thing also. I want to emphasize that. You need to ask a doctor, do what I do when I'm looking at papers. I am always prioritizing, looking for the adverse effects. And when they aren't there, I look elsewhere for them. And then I don't, I look down on the people. There was just something I read the other day was this, where, they didn't talk about the risk of blood clots. I can't remember what this was. It was sort of an amazing thing to do or take. And they didn't, that there could be a risk of unstable plaque breaking off and cause. And I figured out that Amy. And then, sure enough, I looked it up in other papers. And that's the thing that you look at and really have to suspect the whole study. And also, by the way, research from China. This is a paper from China. So much fraud out of there. It's like drugs from India. Avoid generic drugs from India. And avoid looking at medical research from China, if at all possible, if there are other studies, because there's a likelihood that it is fraudulent. And that sort of thing.
It's scary how much fraudulent literature there is in this country. I mean, I interviewed Charles Pillar late last summer or something like that. He did a paper in Science on all of the literature that was on Alzheimer's and the plaque hypothesis and how they were falsifying data just to support their hypothesis. So this is insane.
I have to tell you, I see this with various researchers I respect. People work, this is human, they work a little too hard to sell their thing. Someone will be, they're strongly, their research area is this drug and not this drug. I don't want to, name names because these are mostly people who are, they're doing really great work. And then I just see, you needed to apply appropriate skepticism here to your own beliefs. That's the thing about the minds being made up with sheets glued to a bed. And you see that in everybody. It's very depressing. A social scientist I know wrote a book with somebody who was a medical doctor, and they mentioned something. And I said to her, I really like and admire her in social science, but wait, this is from 2000. This is 2020. It was 2024 at the time. That's not valid as support for this. There's been research since then, or, it's that sort of thing when you see this. And I always go to the citations in a paper, and you see them errors, big error. And this is not, I did not come up with this, this has been a thing for a while. Geraldine Pryor, I learned about it from her, the endocrinologist from BC, that there's been a confusion of progesterone, which is the FDA approved drug and the hormone in your body. It's the FDA approved drug that's the same molecularly as the hormone in your, and then the synthetic knockoff drug that has all of these harms called medroxyprogesterone acetate. Scientists, really famous scientists, they confuse them. There's this paper by a really famous person in science in this area, and it's all about how progesterone causes this or that or the other thing. And I thought, and what was claimed, it didn't make sense if you know the biology, the actions in our cells and everything. Progesterone, I always look at that. Go down to the cells, the physiology, and look at all sorts of studies in different areas, not just clinical studies, but animal studies, to see how is that happening there? How is that happening there? Or do we have some kind of similarity? And this, you go to the back paper where she said progesterone did this, like, Jacques Hughes. It was every citation was for medroxyprogesterone acetate, which is a totally different drug. The FDA, when you get the little package insert from your progesterone, it has the standards for medroxyprogesterone acetate, which is a different drug, where progesterone's, unless you have liver ascites, or which are some kind of fluid buildup, or really low blood pressure, or there's some other conditions like rare conditions, basically progesterone, peanut oil, it's in peanut oil. If you're allergic, progesterone's an extremely healthy and low adverse effect drug to take. The best they could come up with when they were trying to say, oh no, we don't want to give this to you, was that it makes you drowsy. Well, yeah. And I take it at bedtime, because at bedtime, drowsy's good. You don't take it at 11 in the morning, then drowsy's bad. Hello. And it's just so terrible. Like, imagine if you went car mechanics who work who have what we see in my book and elsewhere about the medical field. You'd never drive your car home because they connect the radiator hose to the gas tank. And I don't know. I mean, it's just so crazy how much is amiss, and how much betrayal of patients there is. And again, doctors, they're not evil. People say, oh, they're in it for the money. I go to Kaiser Permanente. My doctor's not getting a Ferrari for treating me. Right. My gynecologist, he's such a good person. He listens to you. He treats you like you, according to your values. This is called shared decision making. And it's the same thing. I do the same thing in my book. Not every woman wants to take hormones. Some are afraid. Some can't take them for various reasons. So I give you, here's why, here's the stuff on hormones, and here are other things you can do. And you can exercise, taking estradiol after menopause with progesterone. This is a way to promote optimum. And remember, I came to that as somebody who came in thinking estrogen's Satan from back in 2002. And I saw that I was wrong. And that's important, to be appropriately skeptical, to look to see, is there, what's the downside here? There is a downside. That kind of thinking protects you, and it's very, very important.
Okay, well, as much as I want to be on Joe Rogan's level, I think we're starting to approach a Joe Rogan level podcast here. So we should probably be wrapping it up. You probably have some things to do, some pork rinds to take to a party or something like that. So where can our listeners, first off, find the book, and when's it going to be released? It's coming out soon, right?
If you pre-order, so here's my book, Going Menopostal: What You and Your Doctor Need to Know About the Real Science of Menopause and Perimenopause. And it will be out May 20th. But if you pre-order it now, I will love you. Oh, see, now I'm out of focus.
That's okay.
So that really helps me. And it's at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Here, I'll try to come into focus now. And indie booksellers. And also, I came out of advertising, remember, and I was a producer. I cast a lot of people. I cast Eartha Kitt for a Hardee's fish sticks commercial. And so I helped cast this voiceover, Carrington McDuffie, for my audiobooks. She's a singer. She's so stellar. She's great. People buy my audiobooks. They sell really well because hopefully because of the book, but also she reads so beautifully, so that's another option if you're not somebody who wants to just sit and read a book. Even though I worked very hard to make it entertaining and say funny things in between all the terrifying medical stuff, sometimes terrible. And then other stuff just sort of, there's some unbelievable stories in here. Some of the stuff that's going on, like about the discovery of progesterone, and, this woman, Geraldine Pryor, how fierce she is. She grew up in the Alaskan wilderness. That informs her fierceness about medicine. So, this is, I promise I entertain you, and I give you the what you need to go to the doctor with to get medical care that's evidence-based in Going Menopostal.
It is a very entertaining book, so I will give a plug for that. I haven't finished it yet because it is a thick book. And the reason I haven't finished it is because you cannot read it like you read some books where you can just kind of skim through and you can get the major points. If you read it like that, you're going to miss a lot of the fun, interesting dialogue and the thought pattern you have in the book. And so as you were talking about it being an audio book, I think that would be the way to consume this book because you're not going to miss a word, but it's not going to be so burdensome that you have to sit down and read, and it's going to take you months to kind of get through the book. Just plop in the car, listen to it as you're driving to and from work, pop in, exercising, you can listen to it. It's a really, really good book. And being a male who certainly lacks some understanding of menopause, despite the fact that I have two sisters and a mom, and a wife, it's really eye-opening. It's a really well-written book, and I loved it. I can't wait to kind of get through the last few chapters that I have yet to read. And so I highly recommend it. We will put links in the description notes to where they can get the book. Run out and get it and enjoy it. It'll be a great book to read.
Thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Keep after the medical profession and
I will.
Keep aging well.
Thank you. Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.